Hi, I'm Will Wilcher with Lotus West Properties. Today we're going to talk about rent control, how it often hurts, not helps. The housing crisis in California continues to spiral out of control, with little to no real effort being made to address the problem using practical or effective solutions. Neglect, poor planning, and a lack of important services for the homeless are only exacerbating these issues. Another significant contributor to the problem can be found in the rent control ordinances that have been slowly implemented throughout the state of California since the late 1970s. The goal of these policies was to ensure that affordable housing was available in light of climbing inflation and vacant units growing ever more scarce. Policies that were introduced in the 70s were revisited in the mid-90s with the Costa-Hawkins Act, a set of regulations that aimed to set some exemptions from the rent control ordinances in the state. But since then, a variety of initiatives and bills have actually strengthened the grip of rent control and provided further protections geared towards safeguarding renters from evictions. None of these new bills managed to repeal the Costa-Hawkins Act, however, though some recent attempts have been made as recently as 2018. They've all failed. Rent control was intended to create a foundation of affordable housing in parts of the state where available housing is limited due to the popularity of the market and the inevitable rise in prices that puts most rental properties out of the reach of low and middle income residents. The policies of rent control are designed to put a cap on rent increases annually with maximum allowable rent costs that cannot be exceeded while a unit qualifies for rent control status. Tenants cannot be evicted from these units without cause. Negative impacts on the community. Unfortunately, rent control has often hurt communities and residents it was aimed at helping. Since rent control restricts property owners from raising rents or exceeding maximum allowable rent costs for a property until it can be placed on the market at current market rate, the properties themselves often suffer. And again, low and middle income renters are prevented from enjoying the benefits of housing they were supposed to be able to afford. This has been seen in a variety of negative impacts. One is actually poor maintenance. The lack of fair market revenue streams and a considerably lower return on investment on rental properties has a direct negative impact on the quality of the housing and potentially reduces the amount of units that are available to people who need them the most. A lack of financial resources for proper maintenance of an apartment building usually results in a rundown, dilapidated building badly in need of repairs. And before long, the building can become unsafe or even uninhabitable, honestly. So, in order to avoid a complete loss in the investment, a property owner might opt to convert it into a condominium, or if the building is showing significant disrepair, the owner might take the hit and honestly abandon the property altogether. But this ends up reducing the number of available units instead of safeguarding affordable units for those who actually need them to stay off the streets. Another negative impact can be seen in the reduction in tenant mobility. A rent-controlled apartment, now that's something that most tenants are extremely reluctant to give up. This defeats the purpose set forth by the rent control policies in most major cities. A tenant who resides in a rent-controlled unit, they're far less likely to move on to housing in a different building that does not qualify for rent control consideration. Instead, that tenant stays put. They stay put to enjoy the benefits of far less expensive rental property than fair market value. This results in a domino effect where units remain occupied by tenants who are paying way below market rate. This spurs landlords to put fewer resources into the building and focus those resources towards other properties where the revenue earned from the units is more in line with what's current in the fair market value. So, some smart property owners who realize they're missing out on revenue, they might convert their properties into condominiums or co-ops that are unaffected by rent control ordinances. But this in turn creates new housing that is well out of reach again for low and middle income residents as demand rises and prices rise with it. Once again, rent control policies have failed to meet their established objective. So, failed to benefit those in need. It's another negative impact. This criteria for meeting the qualifications of rent control sometimes dictates that a unit can be occupied by members of the same family, transferring that property from one member to the next, and often from generation to generation even. As the years go by, the value of the property increases and the market price rises, but the landlord is unable to collect what it's worth. If the family has attained great wealth during that time, or if they've been wealthy from the outset, then they're not really the people who are intended to receive the benefits from rent control promises. But on the contrary, these units remain out of reach again for low and middle income tenants in need. So, let me leave you with this. These are only some of the many unanticipated yet very evident disadvantages of a program that was supposed to help so many communities. So what are the most effective solutions? The first is to drastically reduce or even eliminate rent control and incentivize developers and property owners to embrace new construction. Promote maintenance and improve the quality of quantity of rental units. This honestly helps to drive the prices of new properties down into ranges that better serve the community. It's time to emphasize the role that property owners and developers play in driving the economy through construction of new properties and investment in housing for communities that are struggling to obtain sufficient rental supply that best meets demand. When the rent prices of a community are not in line with the market value, it sends messages to developers and landlords that housing is not a premium, and thus a slowdown in construction is appropriate. But that only serves to leave fewer units open in a crowded market. These are all reasons to consider this, and I really appreciate your time. Thanks for listening.